Suddenly, the casting for Rio Lobo began behind the scenes, where director Howard Hawks searched for actors who would bring both old school and fresh energy to his Western. When it came to the star, John Wayne was never in question. Hawks knew Wayne's rugged confidence and easy charisma would anchor the whole film. There was no need for a typical audition. Wayne was both the blueprint and the draw. Meanwhile, the supporting cast demanded more thought and improvisation. Jennifer O'Neill was selected after Hawks auditioned bright young actresses and noticed her mix of innocence and spirit. She impressed Hawks during chemistry tests, where her natural rapport with Wayne convinced producers she was right for the role of Shasta. Despite being new to the screen, for Jorge Rivero as the sharp Mexican officer, Hawks wanted someone convincing and charismatic enough to play opposite Wayne. Rivero, known for action films in Mexico, caught Hawks' attention, and his audition showed a magnetic presence. Christopher Mitchum, son of actor Robert Mitchum, brought an eagerness and sincerity that set him apart at a crowded audition. Howard Hawks connected immediately, sensing something Wayne could play off of a quality that wasn't manufactured, but simple, earnest, just what the part of Tuscarora needed. Jack Elam, a familiar face from countless westerns, secured his role thanks to Hawks' appreciation for Elam's comic timing and scruffy charm. Instead of reading lines, Elam's audition became more a conversation, showing off the humor and warmth Hawks wanted for the quirky Phillips. At every stage, Hawks ignored rigid studio rules and focused on natural chemistry, watching actors together, swapping out pairs, and sometimes rewriting dialogue on the spot to match sparks he saw. Despite some studio worries about casting lesser-known leads with Wayne, Hawks believed the spontaneous spirit among the chosen cast would draw out humor, tension, and warmth in equal measure. Such choices proved crucial, as the interplay between fresh and seasoned faces helped Rio Lobo carve out its own spot amid Western classics. When Howard Hawks directed Rio Lobo in 1970, he built the film with his signature sense of relaxed pacing and camaraderie. Instead of focusing on flashy technique, Hawks trusted the chemistry between his cast, especially John Wayne, whom he directed as a familiar, steady hero without any forced dramatics. Drawing inspiration from classic westerns, Hawks relied on natural dialogue and understated emotional moments. He'd worked with Wayne before, so their collaboration felt easy and unforced, creating an environment where the actors could play off each other and improvise within the script structure. Hawks made the sets feel lived in and let scenes breathe, allowing character interactions to drive the energy rather than explosions or fast editing. He believed in telling stories that audiences could understand without much explanation, so he eschewed complicated visual tricks, making choices that kept the focus on people and their relationships. Still, he orchestrated action scenes with a steady, unhurried hand, letting the tension build through simple, practical stunts. Hawks' westerns, including Rio Lobo, often reflected his lifelong fascination with loyalty, friendship, and codes of honor, themes that run quietly through each exchange and showdown. Working closely with cinematographer William H. Clothier, Hawks favored broad open spaces and sunlight, painting the landscape as almost a partner for the characters. The script, written by Lee Brackett, was another layer of collaboration. Hawks kept her involved during shooting, often tweaking lines to suit the performer's strengths. On set, Hawks would give calm, clear directions, trusting his seasoned crew to deliver what he wanted while always giving actors the freedom to interpret their roles. Influenced by earlier films such as Rio Bravo and El Dorado, Hawks sought to recapture a sense of camaraderie, an easy humor that could only come from mutual respect and long professional relationships. As a director nearing the end of his long career, Hawks approached Rio Lobo with a relaxed confidence, weaving together everything he had learned about storytelling, star power, and the untold bonds that define the Old West. When you think about classic Western movies, Rio Lobo often comes to mind as one of the final films in John Wayne's long career. The movie tells the story of a group of Union soldiers hunting down a traitor who betrayed their mission during the Civil War, and then getting caught up in a Texas town taken over by corrupt officials. Fans of Westerns often talk about Rio Lobo's strong soundtrack, exciting shootouts, and the way John Wayne brings his usual calm, gruff attitude to the role of Colonel Cord McNally. Throughout the movie, you'll find action, suspense, moments of humor, and even parts that feel unexpectedly sad. There are also many surprising and funny behind-the-scenes facts, and a few shocking stories about what happened during filming, so keep watching this video to find out more. One question for everyone watching is Is there a particular scene or moment in Rio Lobo that has stayed with you over the years? Maybe it's the big final showdown or a quiet conversation between the characters. Another thing to think about is whether Rio Lobo has inspired you or made an impact on your life. If you have a story about how this movie influenced you, we want to hear from you. What's your most cherished memory or personal experience with Rio Lobo? Was there a time this film helped you in a tough moment or brought your family together in front of the TV? Please share your stories and special memories in the comments below. Everyone has their own connection with movies like this, and your experiences are what make talking about Rio Lobo so interesting and fun. Meanwhile, behind the scenes of Rio Lobo, the desert air filled with dust and anticipation as director Howard Hawks, already well known for his tough westerns, returned to familiar territory in every sense. Much of the filming took place in and around old Tucson studios in Arizona, as well as areas of the Sonoran Desert, with some scenes shot along the Rio Grande and in dusty Mexican border towns. These places offered not just dramatic scenery, but a practical advantage: sunlight for hours, wide open spaces for long shots, and the trademark look that Hawks wanted. The set designers built entire towns from the ground up, using rough-hewn wood and aged paint to give everything an authentically weathered appearance. Mud, straw, and loose boards were used to make the buildings seem lived in and old, perfect for a story set in the chaos after the Civil War. Crew members worked around the clock to keep buildings standing despite harsh winds and sudden storms that sometimes washed roads away, delaying shoots and forcing everyone to sleep in makeshift quarters. Additionally, the film's pace was shaped by John Wayne's presence and schedule. At that time, Wayne was recovering from lung surgery, and the crew accommodated his health by staging easier scenes first. Gunman and animal handlers took risks driving horses across rocky ground and deep riverbeds, and they innovated ways to move big action set pieces, constructing collapsible bridges and rigging them to fall apart safely during shootouts. Portable generators ran lights through the night because daylight didn't always last as long as hoped. Furthermore, Hawks and his team brought in new camera equipment, including lightweight lenses, which made it easier to get sweeping panoramic shots from horseback or wagons without the heavy setups of previous years. This allowed for a more mobile style of shooting that let actors move freely and gave battle scenes a real sense of fluid motion. Special effects were practical and achieved with expert timing charges buried in dusty roads for explosions, careful pyrotechnics to simulate gunfights, and skilled wrangling so horses would not be hurt during the dramatic chases. Only a small group knew about a hidden rail running under part of the street that allowed camera dollies to glide smoothly while following actors at a run. Snacks and cold drinks were kept nearby, as temperatures in the Sonoran Desert rose over 100 degrees some afternoons, causing makeup to melt and tempers to flare. Howard Hawks, unflappable as always, pushed his cast and crew with a soft word or a raised eyebrow, trusting their skill to get the best out of a difficult shoot. Even as the Old West came alive again on dusty Arizona horizons, the film's production balanced modernization with tradition, blending clever problem-solving and physical grit to capture the rough beauty and adventure fans expected from a John Wayne epic. Eventually, Rio Lobo comes across as a mixed bag, both endearing and frustrating depending on what viewers are looking for. On one hand, John Wayne remains a commanding presence, embodying the aging, rugged hero with enough charm and gravitas to carry many scenes on his own. For some, his portrayal of Colonel McNally shines as a throwback to the larger-than-life characters that made him an icon. Yet, signs of age and fatigue show through, with some noting that Wayne's health may have affected his energy levels during filming, which subtly influenced the tone and overall pacing of the film. At the same time, the supporting cast sparks a swirl of opinions. Jack Elam delights in his role as Phillips, arriving late in the story, but quickly stealing scenes with his wild-eyed, madcap energy, offering some of the film's lightest, most enjoyable moments. Jorge Rivero's performance as Frenchie stands out for his striking presence, though some question Hollywood's penchant for making minority characters half something to fit certain stereotypes. A broader comment on casting habits of the era. Rivero manages to hold his own opposite Wayne, although his inexperience surfaces in moments of wooden delivery. In contrast, Jennifer O'Neill's role as Shasta Delaney provokes clashing reactions. She cuts a striking figure and brings some fire to her scenes, but the supposed romance between her and Rivero comes off as forced, never quite capturing believable chemistry. Some find her character unnecessarily abrasive, more dictated by the script than by the potential nuances of the actress. Next, performances from the rest of the ensemble verge on uneven. Christopher Mitchum's likable, but lackluster acting matches the rather thin character he portrays. Mike Henry's Sheriff Blue Tom Hendricks makes an impression, but feels underused, missing the brawl or standoff you might expect in a Western of this kind. Other actors, like Victor French and David Huddleston, turn in solid if brief performances, the latter providing a memorable, comic moment during a staged tooth-pulling scene. Brief, almost cameo appearances by notable faces: George Plimpton's brief turn as a gunfighter or Bob Steele, and Hank Worden showing up without fanfare, add a sense of old Hollywood nostalgia for those who recognize them, but these parts are mostly fleeting and have little impact on the story. Moving from cast to script, the film's writing is frequently called out as a weak spot. The dialogue often feels simplistic, lacking subtlety or depth, and many lines tumble over into unintentional humor. Corny moments pepper the film, leaving some laughing at the oddball attempts at wit or drama. This uneven writing doesn't do favors for actors already working with limited character development, resulting in several flat portrayals and awkward exchanges. For many, the story works well enough for a cozy, nostalgic viewing on a rainy evening, but it struggles to reach the narrative height of director Howard Hawks' best work. For longtime fans of John Wayne or Western films, the movie holds a certain charm, especially as it marks Hawks' final outing as a director and features a handful of debut and uncredited performances. Viewers delight in spotting actors making their cinematic start or little-known cameos by familiar Hollywood names. These minor discoveries give the film additional interest for fans of classic cinema, even though these parts don't elevate the overall resolution. Still, Rio Lobo is not without its pleasures. The interplay between Wayne and the other characters provides some memorable exchanges, particularly in comedic or tense moments. Set pieces like Huddleston's dentist scene or Elam's wild antics inject much-needed fun. The Western landscape, shootouts, and showdowns still deliver on basic genre expectations. However, the script's lack of sophistication and inconsistent performances hold it back from being among the greats. Overall, Rio Lobo is best approached as a piece of nostalgia, significant for the experiences of longtime Western fans and Wayne loyalists, who may forgive its stumbles for the sake of comfort viewing and familiar faces. Newer viewers or those looking for tighter script work, compelling romance, or uniformly strong acting may find its flaws more glaring. Although its heart and veterans carry it some distance, it falters on novelty and polish, making it a divisive but memorable entry in its era's Western catalog. Throughout the production of Rio Lobo, composer Jerry Goldsmith aimed to create a musical score that would echo the spirit of classic Westerns while bringing his own lively touch to the film's soundscape. Drawing from the cinematic tradition of bold melodies and sweeping orchestration, Goldsmith used a full orchestra to bring out the drama and action underpinning the film's plot. The main theme, with its energetic brass and stirring strings, gives a sense of hope and danger that fits perfectly with John Wayne's gruff, determined character. Between the shootouts and horseback chases, Goldsmith added moments of quiet where gentle guitar and subdued woodwinds mirror the loneliness and uncertainties of the characters. The score grows tense and fast when the heroes face trouble or sneak through moonlit towns, creating suspense that heightens the viewing experience. Meanwhile, the soundtrack's Western flavor is strengthened by the use of traditional instruments like harmonica and banjo, which blend with the orchestra to remind listeners they're on the frontier. Goldsmith spoke about wanting each piece of music to feel like another character in the story, setting the mood without taking over the scene. Musicians involved in the score have mentioned how Goldsmith's attention to timing and rhythm demanded precision even when the music sounded relaxed and free. In scenes of friendship or loss, the music softens and pauses, letting viewers share the emotions of the on-screen moments. By blending dramatic arrangements with quieter, heartfelt cues, the soundtrack of Rio Lobo supports the narrative at every turn, guiding the audience through moments of suspense, humor, heartbreak, and triumph. Goldsmith's score stands as a vital thread that holds together the unfolding tale of loyalty, revenge, and justice out on the open range. During production, details about the actors and casting choices drew particular attention. Hank Worden, known for his steady presence in Westerns, had direct ties to transportation history since his father worked as a train engineer for the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad, echoing the rail themes often found in classic Westerns. Meanwhile, Jack Elam served as an example in the film industry of how character actors cycle through different stages of recognition. David Huddleston described Elam's career as a series of phases. At first, people asked who he was, then sought him directly, then looked for someone like him, then for a younger version, and finally forgot his name altogether. This pattern, common among character actors in Hollywood, showed how fame and demand shift across decades. Another notable aspect came from the controversy involving one of the casting decisions. The choice to cast a Hispanic actor as a Confederate soldier sparked criticism, raising questions about historical accuracy and representation during a time when Westerns shaped cultural ideas about the past. These behind-the-scenes stories, alongside the film's themes of loyalty and betrayal, added layers of complexity that are still discussed among audiences and scholars. Suddenly, the opening train robbery scene bursts onto the screen, capturing the stark tension between the Union soldiers and the Confederate raiders. Director Howard Hawks uses sweeping wide shots to highlight the dusty chaos, while close-ups of John Wayne's steady composure as McNally draw viewers into the personal stakes at play. Cinematographer William H. Clothier's use of sunlight and shadow emphasizes the bleakness of war and the sharp lines of loyalty. John Wayne, in later interviews, reflected on how the grid of real locations made the danger feel tangible for both cast and audience, and actress Jennifer O'Neill recalled Hawks urging everyone to let the camera linger, giving their moments room to breathe. Moving deeper into town, the jailhouse siege scene stands out with sharp dialogue and carefully framed shots through window bars, making the audience feel as trapped as the characters. Howard Hawks, known for his unflashy but effective direction, let small gestures and silent glances do as much work as the spoken lines. In a tense exchange between Wayne and Jorge Rivero's character, the weight of betrayal hangs in the air, with the camera slowly circling, building anxiety. Critics at the time liked how Hawks let seasoned actors drive the story's emotion, keeping the focus on faces even when gunfire erupts. Later, when the action shifts to the final shootout at the ranch, the movie shows its sense of teamwork, both in story and production. Wayne's calm leadership, both as McNally and on set, comes through in the crisp blocking of scenes and the easy flow of dialogue. One crew member remembered how Hawks barely raised his voice, using hand signals to guide actors and extras, trusting them to hit their marks, while Clothier's camera captured sweeping vistas broken by sudden bursts of action. Every shot feels deliberate, from the close-ups of Wayne's squint to the wide pans as gun smoke drifts over the prairie. All these moments blend action with a sense of everyday hardship, making Rio Lobo's final stand both iconic and strangely intimate, as if the dust and sweat of the frontier could drift right off the screen. Meanwhile, on location in Mescal, Arizona, George Kennedy and Michelle Carey were taking a break from shooting alongside Frank Sinatra when they heard John Wayne had received the Academy Award for True Grit. They decided to drive the 40 minutes to Old Tucson Studios to congratulate him, leaving Sinatra behind. At the studio, Robert Mitchum was around to watch his son Christopher at work, leading to a unique gathering of actors who had previously shared scenes. John Wayne hoped to create a memorable moment by bringing both Michelle and Mitchum back together, echoing roles from El Dorado, and considered having Kennedy appear as a prisoner escorted by familiar characters. They even imagined a scene where Michael's character would recognize Mitchum and reference an earlier confrontation, hinting at the connected histories of the films. However, director Howard Hawks refused to allow the scene, and contractual obligations with Dirty Dingus McGee, as well as Mitchum's temporary retirement, prevented it from taking place. Elsewhere, Jorge Rivero encountered a stern lesson in punctuality. Unfamiliar with American roads, he showed up late on his first day, finding Hawks and the entire crew waiting in annoyed silence. Hawks made it clear that there would be no tolerance for lateness, and threatened to fire Rivero if it happened again. From that point, Rivero always arrived well ahead of schedule to avoid any issues with the director. On set, careful consideration was given to John Wayne's physical condition due to his age and declining health. For his fight scene with Victor French, most of the action used a body double, and the sequence was shot to keep Wayne's participation limited. Much of the confrontation happened off-camera, relying on sound to deliver the impact while preserving Wayne's image and safety. Gradually, Rio Lobo made its mark on audiences at a time when America was changing. The film came out in 1970, right when the Western genre was fading, And newer, more modern movies were making people think differently about war, heroes, and what justice really meant. John Wayne starred in Rio Lobo as a familiar kind of hero, brave, tough, and dedicated to doing the right thing. For many older viewers, he represented values they grew up with, such as honesty, loyalty, and determination. The movie was comforting because it reminded people of simpler times, even as the world was filled with questions about war and equality following events like the Vietnam War and the Civil Rights Movement. Some viewers loved its action and felt a sense of nostalgia, seeing it as a last, classic Western before movies changed for good. The story's setting after the Civil War suggested that people could come together despite old conflicts, and it showed characters joining forces across old sides. This theme quietly echoed America's longing for unity. Rio Lobo also nudged at the unfairness of corruption and greed through its villains, reflecting a growing feeling that old institutions could not always be trusted. Although it did not make a deep statement about race or gender, it did feature strong-willed female characters, which was a small step for the genre. The movie's influence showed up in how people talked about the decline of the traditional cowboy hero and the end of a certain type of Hollywood film. Over time, Rio Lobo came to mean more as the last breath of the classic Western era, and today it reminds people of the stories that used to draw families together around the TV, sparking conversations about right and wrong, courage, and the kinds of heroes people believe in. After True Grit earned John Wayne his only Academy Award, a string of his later films faced mixed to negative reactions from both critics and audiences. And in this period, certain collaborators remained familiar, including Edward Faulkner, who had worked with Wayne in several earlier productions and joined him for a final time here. The project's director, Howard Hawks, was nearing the end of a long career, and this would become his last film, marking the close of his work in Hollywood. While Wayne had just appeared in another Western, which did not heavily feature him, this new movie tried to mix traditional Western elements with some sense of change, yet failed to impress. Reviews noted predictable story points and issues with pacing, contributing to weak ticket sales. Compared with Wayne's following film, which used sharper action scenes and more humor to draw crowds, this effort fell short. Later projects for Wayne struggled in different ways. Some suffered at the box office, others from poor critical reaction. Attempts to reinvent himself by echoing younger action stars did not resonate, often due to his advancing age, health concerns, or the repetitiveness of scripts. After working with Katharine Hepburn in a sequel to his Oscar-winning role met with poor critical response, but some commercial success, Wayne began to consider retirement. Ultimately, he delivered a much-praised final performance as a dying gunfighter. The film in question, as Hawks' last, and Faulkner's last with Wayne, stands as a symbol for the end of multiple eras in Hollywood Westerns. Meanwhile, when Rio Lobo debuted in 1970, critics received it with mixed feelings. Some longtime John Wayne fans enjoyed seeing him in a familiar Western role, guided once more by the legendary Howard Hawks. However, reviewers like Roger Ebert saw it as simply repeating old patterns, not bringing much that was new or exciting. Many pointed out that Wayne's performance was strong, but compared to earlier classics like Rio Bravo or El Dorado, Rio Lobo seemed less energetic and lacked fresh ideas. Critics described the film as slow in places, with unnecessary scenes, and secondary characters who didn't add much to the story. Still, Wayne's charm and presence kept some audience members entertained, especially those who were fond of traditional Westerns. There was a sense among moviegoers that new generations wanted more modern stories, while some older viewers appreciated the familiar comfort of Wayne's style. Despite the big names associated with the film, Rio Lobo did not win any major awards or receive nominations from the Oscars, Golden Globes, or other important film organizations, which affected its reputation compared to other iconic Westerns of the era. For Howard Hawks, it was the last film he directed, and for Wayne, it was one of many late career roles that underlined his legendary status, but didn't bring new honors. The lack of critical awards meant there was little extra recognition for the cast or crew, but loyal fans remembered it as another collaboration between two Hollywood legends, even if critics were not generous with their praise. After the camera stopped rolling on the set of Rio Lobo, the air felt heavy with stories waiting to be told. John Wayne, larger than life even off-screen, would amble across the dusty set cracking gentle jokes to lighten the mood. Yet crew members noticed that Wayne moved a little slower than he did in movies past. He'd recently had lung surgery, and when the director Howard Hawks called for a break, Wayne took a seat, catching his breath, but never complaining. Through the haze of desert heat in Arizona, Hawks, already in his 70s, worked meticulously, giving orders in a gruff but caring tone. The cast felt his presence, knowing that this project was his swan song, and the mood would swing between playful and reverential. A notorious story passed around was that of Jack Elam, the bug-eyed character actor, who showed up with practical jokes ready and kept extras on their toes with surprise squirts from a water pistol. Jorge Rivero, a newcomer to Hollywood, often recalled how Wayne welcomed him, inviting him for poker games at the hotel after long shoots. Far from glamorous, filming often meant dealing with rattlesnakes on location, cast members shouting warnings, and the prop master tasked with shooing them away. Sometimes, production was interrupted by desert storms that rolled in suddenly, forcing the crew to scramble into makeshift tents, and Wayne to share old cowboy tales over tin cups of coffee until they could resume. At night, locals would gather near the set, hoping to spot Wayne, who occasionally waved, his towering silhouette unmistakable. Crew members felt history in the making, aware this was old Hollywood's last hurrah, and even the outtakes were full of laughter, mishaps, and a sense that everyone there was contributing to something memorable. Although Rio Lobo did not achieve the same acclaim as some earlier John Wayne westerns, it holds a notable place in film history as one of the last collaborations between Wayne and director Howard Hawks. This 1970 film reflected the era's shifting attitudes toward traditional Western themes, blending classic motifs with a slightly modern sensibility. Its legacy partly lies in how it marked the transition from the older, more straightforward Westerns to the revisionist styles that would gain prominence in the 1970s and beyond. The movie's portrayal of loyalty, justice, and redemption influenced some later Western filmmakers who sought to balance nostalgia for the genre's past with contemporary storytelling. While Rio Lobo did not directly inspire a series of imitators or a franchise, its techniques and themes echoed in other works that explored the complexity of frontier life and heroism. This film also serves as a reminder of the changing face of Hollywood at the time, when the Western genre was evolving and embracing new narratives and aesthetics. The impact it had on future filmmaking is subtle, but present, showing that even films not widely hailed as masterpieces can contribute to the ongoing dialogue within cinematic genres. Looking back at Rio Lobo, do you remember how you first felt seeing John Wayne stride onto the screen, rifle in hand and eyes unwavering? Maybe it reminded you of watching westerns with family, or perhaps you saw it in a packed theater, feeling the thrill of adventure and the sweep of Elmer Bernstein's music carrying the story forward. Sometimes, moments from movies like Rio Lobo stay with us for years, shaping the way we think about heroes, loyalty, or even the landscape of the American West. The film's mix of action, humor, and rugged friendship, along with its classic gunfights and dusty towns, might have given you a love for westerns or brought a strong sense of nostalgia. Share your favorite scenes, memories, and how the film touched your life, whether it sparked your imagination, introduced you to John Wayne, or became a story you watched again and again. Let others know if Rio Lobo changed the way you saw movies, or if it stood out among other films from that time. Give a like if you enjoy discussing classic cinema, and subscribe for more conversations. Pass this along to anyone who treasures movies from the past. Invite a friend to share their own stories, and keep the spirit of Rio Lobo alive by joining in with your own experiences and thoughts. Your memories matter, and the way this film shaped your view of the world or your love for movies is something worth sharing.